What is up, everybody? It is Chris from the Commander Crew coming at you with a deck tech. Today we have Hamza, Guardian of Arashin. Can this elephant win us to victory? Can our little artifacts go crazy and fill the board and swarm our opponents? Let's find out in today's deck tech.
Welcome to the Commander Crew, a Magic the Gathering Commander YouTube channel where we ask the question, who's your commander?
We want to thank you for watching our videos. You can help support us by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and hitting the bell notification icon.
You can also go to thecommandercrew.com to check out our t-shirts, masks, pet hoodies, and other Commander Crew goodies.
If you want to buy any of the cards seen in this video, be sure to click our TCG player affiliate link in the show notes below.
Lastly, you can help us out by heading to our official Patreon page and becoming a direct supporter of the channel. Now let's
get to the
video. Oh no.
So today's deck tech, we have Hamza, Guardian of Arashin. 4 green-white for a 5/5 elephant warrior. And it reads, this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. And creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter. Basically, we're going to put as many counters on as many creatures as possible and make our creatures cost literally 0 because we're playing artifact creatures. That's right, we're playing modular. This is going to be epic. First off, let's get some rocks and some ramp, because we're not going to play anything if we got nothing on the board to play with. So we want to make sure we ramp up and put the right rocks on the battlefield to get that game going. As always, there's Soul Ring, taps for 2 mana for 1 cost. Arcane Signet, taps for any color of our commander. And Selesnya Signet, because it's just a great rock overall. Then we have Nature's Law, which lets you search for a forest and put it on the battlefield. And Farseek, which lets you search for a plains and put that on the battlefield tapped. And then we have Birds of Paradise, which taps for any 1 color to that mana pool. And Llanowar Elves, because it's just a great, phenomenal card. For the use of counters with our creatures, we have Crystalline Crawler, which when you can remove a 1/1 counter, you can add any 1 mana of any color, and you can tap it to put a counter on it. Gyre's Sage, which will add a green mana for each counter on it itself. And Incubation Druid, which taps for 1, but once you have a counter on it, you can tap it for 3 of any single color, and you can have Adapt to put that counter on it later game. Then there's Solemn Simulacrum, which when it enters the battlefield, it'll search for an actual land and put on the battlefield, and when it dies, it's going to draw you a card. We also have Workhorse, which you can remove a counter on it and add a single colorless mana, and you have Fertile, which potentially can give you a lot of mana repetitively over the course of the single game. Since we have so many counters on our creatures, we're going to play Jing Zhangyu, Wildcrafter, and Rishkar's Expertise, because at these creatures, they're going to allow us to put a counter on things, but also have all our creatures with the counter tap for either 1 mana of any color or tap for a mana of green. These can be extremely efficient over the long term of the game because so many creatures are going to have counters on them. And we're playing white, so you know what we're playing. We're playing Smothering Tithe. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you can pay. They have to pay 2. And if they don't, you got to call this artifact that it taps for any 1 color. This can become game-changing. If you have this in your opening hand, be careful about getting rid of it because it can give you so much value over time, because a lot of players just don't want to pay the 2 because they want to draw their spells and they want to play their cards. And they don't want to pay extra 2. Keep that in mind at all times. Now to get things rolling, we're going to have some spells that cost literally 0. The more mana you put into that spell, the more counters that creature will have, and in turn, the better cost reduction with Hamza. Stonecoil Servant has protection from multicolor, reach, and trample. Ugin's Conjurant enters with any counters, and if you damage we dealt to, you remove a counter. And Endless One, just a simple dump all your mana into it, get some counters. Even if you cast these for 1 mana, they're going to still reduce the cost of our future creatures and Hamza by a single spell, because that's super efficient. And then we have Walking Ballista, which is an XX, which it enters with X counters on it, pay 4 to put a counter on it, but when you remove a counter, it deals 1 damage to any target. You could dump so much mana into this and destroy so many creatures, or just pick off your individual opponents that have the little mana dorks. And Hangerback Walker is also an XX, with enters with X counters on it, but when it dies, you put a 1/1 colorless stop to creature token with flying on the battlefield for each counter on it, and you can pay 1 and tap it to put a counter on it. If this were to die late game, it's going to give you a lot of value. And now let's get into Modular. The whole purpose of this deck, those colorless creatures that are going to basically be free the longer we have Hamza out on the battlefield. Arcbound Crusher, Arcbound Ravager, and Arcbound Sith all come in with a counter on it, and if they die, those counters are moved around. Arcbound Crusher's got Trample. When another artifact enters, you put a 1/1 counter on it with mod 1. Arcbound Ravager, which puts a counter on it when you sack an artifact with mod 1. And Arcbound Slith, which it enters with a counter on it, but whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you add another counter. These are basically just free value engines on creatures. And we have Extruder, which it does have Echo, but you can sacrifice an artifact and put a 1/1 counter on any target creature. Arcbound Hybrid, which has haste and mod 2, and Arcbound Worker, which only costs a single mana with mod 1, which can basically get the game going really quickly. But sometimes we need to search out the specific spells because they're not going to be in our opening hand, and we might not always have Hamza out there, so we want to make sure we can reduce the cost of our artifacts to get them out more efficiently. Enlightened 2 will let you search your library for any artifact or enchantment and put it into your on top of your library. Adventure's Fair will gain you a life if you have 3 or more artifacts, but once you do, you can pay 4 and tap it and sacrifice and search for any artifact card and put it into your hand. This is pretty epic. And then Scrapyard Recombiner has mod 2, also great, but you can sacrifice any artifact, search your library for a construct card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. There are a few awesome constructs in this deck to keep an eye out for. And then if you want to reduce things, we have Joyous Familiar, which has flying and historic spells cost 1 less, so that's all of your artifacts and your Hamza. And then Foundry Inspector, which makes any artifact spell cost 1 less to cast. Once you start stacking up all these reduction costs, everything's going to be able to play out completely for free, and it's going to start snowballing very efficiently. Now we're going to want to put counters on our creatures because not all the time we're going to be able to have our modular cards with this. So we got to figure out a way to make sure we can put a couple of counters and then multiply them. Path of Discovery is a phenomenal card because whenever a creature enters the battlefield, it explores. You reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a non-land, you get to put a 1/1 counter on it. So basically, it's modular on an effect. Cathar's Crusade, basically whenever a creature enters the battlefield, and you're going to have a lot of that happening, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Felidar Retreat has a mod option where basically whenever a land enters the battlefield, you can either create a 2/2 Cat Beast or put a 1/1 counter on each creature, give Vigilance at the end of turn. Such a good card. And then Gavany Township, you pay 4 mana and put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Then Animation Module, which is a pretty awesome card. Whenever 1 or more counters are put on a permanent, you pay 1 and you create another 1/1 token. That's so much value. Karn's Bastion will proliferate for 4, basically doubling up all your counters additionally. Hardened Scales will put 1 more counter anytime a counter is put onto a creature. And Branching Evolution is when 1 or more counters are put onto a creature, you put twice that many. That's so many counters. Then we just have creatures that put counters on other creatures right from the get-go. Verdurous Gearhulk costs 5 trample, but it's a 4/4 by the boot. But when you enter the battlefield, you distribute 4 1/1 counters on any number of target creatures. Steel Overseer, now it does only work for artifact creatures, but you put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature you control when you tap it. Now, Shalai Voice of Plenty is 3 and a white for a 3/4 angel, but you, planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you control all have hexproof. And you pay 4 in green, you put a 1/1 counter in each creature you control. So much value. Now, we got to make sure we draw, because if we don't have the right draw, we're going to sit there with our empty hand and not know what to do with it. We need to start digging for more answers, digging for more solutions. Mindless Automaton is a colorless 4-drop where we're enters with 2 counters on it. Discard a card, pay 1, put a counter on it, but you remove 2, you get to draw a card. Armorcraft Judge enters the battlefield and you draw a card for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. Etched Oracle is a 4-drop with Sunburst. Pay 1, remove 4 counters. Target player draws 3 cards. And then Inspiring Call, 2 and a green. Draw a card for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it, but it also has creatures gain indestructible in a turn. Other great phenomenal cards include the Great Henge, which it does cost 7 green, but it is reduced by the greatest power among creatures you control, which that's going to be a huge reduction, and this is probably only going to cost green. And then immediately you can tap it for green and gain 2 life. So you're basically replacing it instantly. But the epic, amazing ability it has is whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you put a 1/1 counter on it and you draw a card. Basically, free spells. Then Guardian Project is whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control, draw a card. Guess what? This is Singleton. It's always going to be a draw. Beast Whisper, whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. And Soul's Majesty, for 4 and a green, sorcery, draw cards equal to the greatest power of target creature you control. This can be upwards of like 9 to 12 card draw. This is an insanely good card. Do not underestimate the amount of power that this card can draw. And now we got to make sure we have a little bit of protection and a little bit of removal. Heroic Intervention makes all permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible at the end of turn. Unbreakable Formation 2 and a white, creatures you control gain indestructible, but if you cast it during your main phase, you put a 1/1 counter on each of those creatures, and they gain vigilance. Lightning Greaves gives haste and shroud for only 0, and you want to protect Hamza at all costs, because once he's gone, things get a little wary. And then Path to Exile, exile target creature. They search for their library for a land, but you're still getting rid of a major threat. But we also want to protect every artifact and our life total. Rebek, Architect of Ascension, 3 and a white. It's a 3/4 human artificer, but artifacts you control have protection from each converted mana cost among artifacts you control. You're going to play all different converted mana costs. So basically, all your artifacts are going to have protection from everything in no time at all. And then Platinum Empyrean, yeah, it does cost 8 for an 8/8, but your life total doesn't change. And with Hamza out, this may cost 0, if not maybe 1 or 2. This is an excellent sleeper. Now, sometimes things are going to die. We need to bring them back. We got to make sure if it goes in the graveyard, we don't lose our abilities. We got to make sure things keep coming back over and over and over again. Junk Diver for 3/1 for a 1/1. Whenever it dies, return another target artifact from your graveyard to your hand. Arcbound Reclaimer, it also has mod too, but you remove a counter from it, you put target artifact card from your graveyard on top of your library. There's a lot of combo shenanigans with that. And the Mirror Retriever is a 1/1 for 2. When it dies, you return another target artifact from your graveyard to your hand. These are phenomenal recursion cards because they themselves are also artifacts, so you got some combos going on in the future. And then Buried Ruin is a land, but you get to return target artifact from graveyard to your hand. And Scrap Troll, which again, it's just another one of those options where when it or another artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return to your hand target artifact with a lesser CMC to your hand. There's a lot of recursion with this card. Now let's wrap it up with a little bit of extra value and how we set the board so we can win the game. Shimmer Mirror is a 2/2 mirror for 3, which has flash, but all your artifact spells have flash now. Awesome ability to surprise our opponents. Triskelion is a 1/1 for 6, but enters the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters on, and you remove a counter and put a 1 damage to any creature or player. You can start pinging off all your opponents. The Ozlith, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had any counters on it, you put those counters on the Oz. And then later on, you can put those counters on something else. Basically, if something were to die, guess what? You don't have to worry about those counters going away because they'll just keep coming back. And then we have the Mystic Forge, where it lets you look at the top card of your library, and you may cast that library card if it's an artifact, and pay 1 life, tap, and exile it. This basically makes sure we don't run out of any gas. Avenger Zendikar is a 5/5, which costs 5 green, but when it enters, you create a 0/1 plan for each land. Sometimes this may not be the many creatures you're creating, but when you have landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each plan. That's when the things start getting crazy. Obzan Battle Priest is a 3/2/3 for white, which has Outlast for white, but the big thing is, each creature you control with a 1/1 counter has lifelink. That can come in clutch in the future. And there's Phyrexian Triniform, one of the new cards. It's a 9/9 for 9, but when it dies, you create 3 colorless Golem tokens. And it has Encore for 12, so there's going to be some serious damage in the future with this card. And then we wrap it up with the lands. Pretty straightforward, pretty clean cut, but you can't forget about the lands. Temple Garden, Brushland, both tap for 2. Croson Verge will let you search for a forest and a plains when you sacrifice, and then Sungrass Prairie will help filter out your mana. Wooded Bastion is a great filter card. Sunpetal Grove taps for both, but it enters the battlefield unless you have a forest or a plains. And then Command Tower taps for any one color of your commander's identity. This is an auto-code in any single deck you're playing in Commander, especially if you're more than one color. And then I have the artifact lands, just because there's some synergy by sacrificing artifacts that this could help out in the game later on. Ancient Den for white, Darksteel Citadel for colorless, and Tree of Tales for green. And that's my Hamza deck. It's pretty epic. I've been playing this for a while now, and I've been tweaking it here and there, and I'm pretty stoked about this deck. Couple downsides just to denote. If there's a board wipe, it gets kind of difficult to come back from it, so be careful with those spells. If you're going to play out your entire hand in a single turn, make sure you have the right way to win, because if you just play your entire hand, now you're out of gas, and it can be pretty difficult to come back from that. So keep an eye out for that. Hamza is a phenomenal card. Great cards to make sure you do not forget about are Path of Discovery and the Great Henge, because those cards in tandem with each other, you can probably draw your entire deck in a single turn. This deck can go pretty fast and completely surprise your opponents because you're playing Selesnya. There's a lot of power in this deck, a lot of quickness to this deck, and it's Selesnya, one of my favorite combinations. I'm totally stoked about Hamza. It's an elephant. That's so cool. Yeah, I could have went Elephant Tribal, but the modular theme is a lot more efficient in my opinion. What do you think of the deck? Would you keep the modular theme, or would you just stray and go right to elephants? That's an option too, you know. Would you put more counters, less counters? How would you do it? Let me know in the comments down below because I would love to hear. Thanks for watching, and catch you soon. Peace.